welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time out to join this webinar where we're going to cover quite a well-known topic thanks to the millions of pounds spent in the sector on advertising, switching providers. So just to recap, my name is Ellie and I support the financial education programs for both Better with Money and our parent company Cushion. So I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to support the ICE Benevolent Fund and the support network to deliver this session. And despite the fact I cannot see or hear you, please do feel free to send through as many questions as you like. So what are we going to cover today? Well, for the next 25 minutes, we are going to explore why you would consider switching providers for things like insurances, TV and energy, and also what to be aware of when going through this type of exercise. So we're going to discuss the following: the benefits of switching, the different areas to review, using comparison sites, which is quite a big one for this topic, tips and tricks, my favorite bit because we all love those, and then finishing with any questions that you may have. Now, just a quick final note before we launch into the detail. The purpose of today's session is to provide you with information and guidance to help you make informed decisions regarding your money management. There is no financial advice being given, and in addition to this, Better with Money is an independent provider of financial education. We have no products to sell, so if I do mention any companies or websites along the way, it is just because we feel they offer a good service for you to take advantage should you wish to. It's not because we are receiving any financial incentive to do so. So to get started, let's consider why you would change providers in the first place. So price walking, also known as loyalty penalty and dual pricing, refers to when new insurance customers received cheaper premiums compared to loyal, long-standing customers renewing their cover. According to the FCA, 6 million insurance customers would have saved 1.2 billion in 2018 if they had paid the average price for their actual risk, as opposed to falling victim of the price walking model. So needless to say, on 1st of January 2022, so this year, the FCA brought in a regulation called the pricing remedy. This new piece of regulation means that renewal prices cannot be higher than new business prices. However, that doesn't mean that your existing provider is the best priced in the market. It just means they can no longer penalise you for your loyalty. So with the rising costs of living, it's key to be looking at all of your costs and making savings where possible to try and avoid eating into your well-being spending. So your meals out, new gadgets, holiday budgets, and the things that make you feel good. It's good practice to get your fixed costs reduced down where possible. Not only are you creating savings, which will boost your financial resilience, but you're staying in control, and that also provides a significant boost to your overall financial well-being. So what needs reviewing? So we've covered why, now to what. What should be on your radar to review? Most insurances are the key ones that spring to mind, and these need renewing typically annually. Home and car insurances are key. Car insurance in particular, you can't actually legally drive without it. Life insurance may come into this, and some of you may get this benefit automatically through work, but it's pretty unusual to swap that year on year. Pet insurance, that's another key one for our furry little friends. Things like private medical and dental insurance are personal preference, but again, will come up for review annually. However, with any form of medical or age-related insurance, it is important to note that the premiums are determined by several factors, some of which being any pre-existing medical conditions and also your age. It goes without saying that the more medical history you have and the older you are, the more expensive the premiums can be for many people. And they typically will stick with the cover they have, as it was possibly taken out when they were perceived as lower risk to the insurance company. Travel insurance, so we are coming into traveling season. You can either do that annually or you can actually do it on a trip by trip basis, but well worth reviewing. Do make a note to check your bank account, because certainly for any package accounts, this is often included automatically as a key benefit. So you could be saving some money by not taking out a separate cover. It's also worth reviewing providers for a lot of your home utilities, so water, energy, internet, TV, and phone. Contracts for broadband and phones can be renewed every 2 years, sometimes more. So it's good to have a hold on when those will be coming up for renewal. Okay, on to where to start. So firstly, have a list of what needs reviewing, and the previous slide can help with that. Check the cover that you currently hold for it to ensure that it's correct. And an example of this being a friend of mine recently realized that they'd left a bathroom and a bedroom off of their home insurance, which was their downstairs loo and their study. And that actually means that the insurance technically isn't valid. So you want to ensure that whatever you're covered on is correct, otherwise it is void. And it's also pretty unlikely that you would get a refund. And B, you want to be ensuring that it's covering what you want. So that means checking whether your insurance is giving you what you think it is. So an example there being, is legal cover included if you want it? This means that when you compare your insurances, you are comparing unit to unit for the prices. You don't want to move to a new provider because it's so much cheaper and then realize actually it means a lot of the cover's been removed, or you're missing a bedroom. So if you do have preferred providers, you can obviously go to them directly and you can ask for a quote and then you compare those yourself. However, even if you do have these preferred providers, it's absolutely worth checking the comparison sites. So there's some pretty well-known logos showing on the slide right now. And we'll know some better than others due to some pretty iconic adverts out there. Most of these providers let you compare most things, but some specialize and lend themselves stronger to certain areas compared to others. So go compare the market, confused.com and Money Supermarket are pretty broad comparison sites, and they cover car insurance and breakdown cover, but you will also find home insurance, pet insurance, energy, broadband, and often travel. There's IMechE.com that focuses more on the purchasing of goods and services. So the website is a great source of information and it promotes informed consumers by testing products, highlighting inferior products or services, and raising awareness on consumer rights. My manager also finds the articles from IMechE particularly interesting, and you can sign up to the newsletter. Similarly, perhaps a personal favourite for me, and I think also the nation, given the last few years, is Money Saving Expert. So that's run by Martin Lewis, and you can compare all sorts on there and find tips and guidance around money in general. He's very topical and he has done a huge amount around the energy crisis. Now, there will be lots of providers on those comparison sites, household names like LV, Churchill, AXA, Saga, and actually many supermarkets will be on those, and you'll be able to compare prices and covers across them. However, it is worth knowing that some providers won't feature on these sites. So Direct Line have made a real point actually out of it. But Zurich, Aviva, Admiral and NFU Mutual are also not on comparison sites. So it does mean you may be missing out on those deals, and it is up to you if you are interested in going to those providers to cross-check. I think it's always worth asking your friends and family about their providers, because if suddenly half of your network use Direct Line and they love them, then it's probably worth inquiring yourself. So when I was designing these slides, this is always a favorite part of mine because we all love tips and tricks. And if you want more, I assure you that the internet can deliver. There are hundreds in a quick Google search. But what I've tried to do is condense it down to the most useful and just also bring in some of my personal favorites. So timing. There is a sweet spot for renewals, and it's usually around 3 weeks before the cover expires, because the different providers know that you've got time to compare, and therefore they need to be outpricing their competitors. Money Supermarket are good because they actually email you 3 weeks before it's due to expire, and they'll give you a quote so you can get a feel for what level of cover they are prepared to offer you and the cost for that cover in the form of a premium. So 3 weeks before is a good time to be doing these comparisons and getting in those quotes. Car insurance, adding named drivers with a high level of no claims can actually help bring down the cost of your insurance. So we used to use my granddad, we used to add my granddad onto mine, and it usually go down by £50. Also, they will ask you for expected mileage. The lower this is, the better your price. Don't just throw a random number around, that being said, but do start monitoring your mileage so that it is accurate. If you're able to park your car off-road, so in a garage, that will also lower the premium, but it is so important with all forms of insurance to make sure you give full disclosure and you're always telling the truth, because the last thing you want is the insurer refusing to pay a claim due to the non-disclosure or the inaccurate information being given at outset. Extras. So this is the amount you are happy to pay in the event of a claim. Obviously, the higher the excess, extras. If there's additional extras that you can add on, make sure you understand these and you don't add on things you don't need. Or on the flip side, not add something that you do need. And then excess is the amount that you are happy to pay in the event of a claim. So obviously, the higher the excess, the less likely you're going to reach out to the provider for smaller things, and therefore the cheaper the premium. But this means you do need to pay anything up to that excess. So do have a think about what suits you and balance out where you sit financially and what excess will give you peace of mind. So payments, if you pay for cover as a one-off annual premium, it's nearly always cheaper than paying monthly. If that is just not an option for you, 0% credit cards can allow you to do this, and then you can pay the credit card off over a few months. Just always be wary of credit cards. They are great tools when they're used appropriately, and then they're dangerous when not. Combining. So sometimes combining your insurances will actually make them cheaper. So a prime example being building and content insurance. These could be two separate policies, but with some insurers, they will do a better deal if you combine them. And then highlighting your highlights. So this was my favorite area. I loved some of the suggestions. You really want to be shouting about anything that makes you lower risk. So there's obvious examples, including, working alarm systems, gated communities, CCTV. There was also a feature on joining a neighbourhood watch scheme, because if you're an active member, you might be able to qualify for a discount on your home insurance. That is because there's some evidence that crime rates are lower in areas where those schemes are being run. And then the final one, some of us are better at this than others, and it's haggling. If you're not a natural at it, it is genuinely quite an awkward experience, but it is also very effective. Most providers will have some leeway, and you want to maximize that. So taking quotes from elsewhere is really effective, but also just questioning the price and saying you're going to look at going elsewhere, can cause some movement. So worth doing, even if it is rather uncomfortable on the phone. Now, remember, if you provide false information and your insurer later finds out, any claims you make will be rejected, and they could actually even result in legal action. So there are some providers out there who will do the work for you, but the bottom line here is it is always better to do it yourself. Multiple reasons, but predominantly you are then getting exactly what you want, and it will get easier every year. If you really don't have the time, then it is better to do it than not do it at all. So there's providers which will look after your energy bills, such as Flipper and Look After My Bills. However, currently energy is all over the place, so maybe worth holding tight before using these guys, because it is fairly unprecedented what we're seeing in the energy market, and therefore it's pretty grey on what's coming. In the future, these may be providers you want to consider if they can relieve you some pressure and help, and they sort of suit your lifestyle better. Some offer a free service to us as a consumer, but they take a commission from the provider that they are going to switch you to. For others, they may charge you a small percentage for the service. So do take care when choosing who to use, and just ensure that you are comfortable with any fees being applied. So staying in control. So on an ongoing basis, it's really about just staying in control and being organised. It can be good practice to try and align your renewals to happen at the same time, so then it's easier to manage on a yearly basis. And also because multi-cover can also be cheaper sometimes. So insuring your home, your car, and your contents, for example, all at once. That isn't guaranteed to be cheaper though, just potentially. It does mean you can pick a certain time of the year to get organised, a great one being between Christmas and New Year. It helps to make a habit if it's an annual event. You can do it on the sofa in your Christmas pyjamas, surrounded by chocolate wrappers. Better with Money do have downloadable tools on their website. That includes a yearly budget planner, so you could pop in what you need to prepare for each month, and that's a good way of staying organised and seeing what's coming up, giving yourself that 3-week head start as well, and getting some quotes in. So lastly, I have put up the details of the ICE Benevolent Fund and Support Network, who have sponsored the webinar today. They can provide invaluable financial, workplace and wellbeing support to you and your families in challenging times. So I have put their website and helpline number here as a useful reminder of their services in case you do need to explore that further. And then finally, thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I hope you have found this content useful and you're feeling more prepared to get into switching those providers and getting the best price where possible. I now want to open up the opportunity for any questions that you may have. So I'm going to pass back over to Lindsay, and then we can run through these now.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ellie. So I do have a first question with regards to car insurance. I have noticed that decreasing the annual mileage below a certain distance doesn't change the quote significantly. For example, 5 to 10k. Also, I constantly have higher quotes if I'm to keep my car in the garage rather than the driveway. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Many thanks for the webinar.
So it's interesting. I think, have you checked with different, on the garage one, I used to keep my car in the garage and the price did used to go down. It might be worth checking with another provider, sense checking if that's the same, and querying with the provider. I would say, why is this not making an impact? Or in the case of the garage, it's almost having the reverse impact. Kind of unusual. So that's when I would just put that to the provider and say, why are these charges happening?
Thank you. We have another question. Do you have any recourse if you switch and find the service is not as good as the old provider?
So have a look at contracts. So depending on providers, you may get the option to cancel the contract within a certain period of time. I'm not sure, it would depend on the provider on whether you get that, and how long it is, and if that's long enough to find out whether you like that provider or not. One to take away, I'm afraid, with getting a bit more detail on that.
Okay, thank you. With energy costs set to rise again before the winter, is there anything I can be doing now to minimise the effects on my heating bills?
So with the energy situation, there are definitely habits we can all be looking at doing, just to sort of get into good habits ahead of winter. So things like if you don't have a smart meter, seeing if you can get one of those built in, because that measures exactly what you're using. But also turning off plug switches. If you're really used to using tumble dryers, maybe get a clothes horse. Things like this that you can get into habits now that are going to bring down your energy usage, and that's going to carry on throughout the winter, where obviously energy usage goes up. But what we're seeing with the energy world is really uncertain, really unprecedented. And I think it's just provided a big reset for a lot of us to go back to basics on our usage and making sure that's as economical as possible, but also just our money habits in general. So looking at things like your fixed costs, bringing them down where you can, using comparison sites, cancelling subscriptions you don't use. And I think we're all just doing that, and then we'll have to take winter sort of as it comes. Any other questions?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute, typically. Right, so why has the cost of those that switched energy provider been added to the standing charge costs of those that remained with the established provider?
I don't know the answer to that one initially. Not going to.
Okay.
But we can take that one away and we can put that in a follow-up, perhaps.
Okay, that'll be fine. Thanks. Next question is: if I switch internet provider, do I need to let my current provider know, or will the new provider inform them?
So typically, no, the new provider will inform them. However, it is always worth contacting your existing provider if you are going to switch, for a few reasons. Number one, they might price match and then you don't have to switch if you're switching because of costs. So that is the time that they are going to panic and kind of give you the best price. But if you are switching for other reasons, such as you just don't like the provider, you do need to check that if you're in contract, if you're leaving early, are there going to be penalties? Because you might want to factor in whether the penalties are worth taking the hit on. And just understanding, mainly that if you're in contract and if you're going to be hit with a bill for leaving early. So I would say it's always worth speaking to the current provider, but the new provider will inform them of the switch.
That's great, thank you. I am on a prepaid energy meter. Will my landlord be able to stop me if I want to change providers?
So if you pay the energy bill directly, so if you are paying the energy provider directly, you do have the right to switch that provider, but you would need to check your tenancy agreement because the landlord may have a preferred supplier. Not that that would necessarily stop you, but you would of course have to let your landlord know that you are switching that provider. So that in the citizen advice website would be able to give a little bit more context. If the landlord pays the energy bill, then you would have no right to switch that provider.
Okay, thank you. And we have just one more question. Why are broadband providers allowed to increase prices by CPI plus each year?
So broadband, so in terms of the CPI, I'm talking about the right thing, they tend to increase them with inflation. So they, in the contracts, that those endless contracts we often get when we enter into a provider, they often do reserve the right to up the contracts and the money on sort of an annual basis. And it's just written into those contracts deep into the text that they know the majority of us kind of skim read. But unfortunately, with things like inflation going up at 9%, we're seeing that happen a lot more, not just in broadband, in phones. It's been quite a bad year for sort of cost of living going up.